February on a mountain ridge, 22 degrees Fahrenheit before sunrise, and you're carrying 5-gallon buckets a quarter-mile uphill because the hand pump froze again. Your cistern's been dry since January. The closest well driller quoted you $18,000 and said he might hit water at 400 feet, might not. This is the moment a lot of families pack it in. They thought they'd made it, thought they'd figured out the land, and then March comes and there's no water left. I've seen good people sell out over this exact problem. What nobody told them is that their grandparents, the ones who settled these ridges in the 1800s, had a solution that cost less than $12 and ran every single day of the year. No pump, no power, no waiting on a drill rig. It was just sitting there in the hillside the whole time. But here's what sends most people down the wrong path first. Most folks try a well first. Around here, that's $35 to $65 per foot, and you're gambling. I know a man who went 380 feet into shale, hit a trickle that gave him 0.5 gallons per minute in summer, then went dry by August. He's out $22,000 and still hauling water. So they pivot to rainwater. A 400-gallon tank runs you $800 to $2,200, depending on whether it's plastic or steel. Looks great in September. By December, the gutters are clogged with oak leaves, the first line freezes, and you're drinking algae by April if you didn't dose it right. Then there's the spring box, the one everybody talks about at the feed store. You find a spring, dig it out, build a 3-foot concrete vault around it. Costs $400 in materials if you do it yourself. Works beautifully until the first big rain, when silt washes down through the rock and fills your box in a week. What the old-timers figured out was that they were all looking in the wrong place. A spring is one spot, a crack in the bedrock where water shoots out. Clean and fast, but rare. A seep is water weeping through 20 or 50 feet of hillside. No single source, just the whole slope staying wet. You walk past it and think it's just a muddy spot. Frontier families built on seeps because they're everywhere in these mountains. Every north-facing slope, every hollow where the ridgeline folds, you've got groundwater sliding over clay and surfacing slow. It doesn't gush, it oozes, but it never stops. A seep gives you maybe 1 to 5 gallons per hour, sometimes less, sometimes more depending on the season. That's 24 to 120 gallons a day without touching a pump. Your great-great-grandmother raised 9 kids on water just like that, pulled from a shallow catch basin dug into the hillside with a spade and lined with rocks. And the timing of when you look, that's the part nobody tells you. Late February through early March, that's your window. The ground's thawing, but the leaves aren't back yet, so you can actually see what you're looking at. Walk slow and watch where the soil stays dark and soft, while everything around it is still frozen hard. Moss lines run vertical down a hillside, not random. They follow water. Look for jewelweed clusters and Christmas ferns staying green through winter, when everything else is brown and dead. Those plants don't lie. Deer paths converge at seeps because animals know before you do. 3 trails coming together at one muddy spot in February means water's moving under there. My grandfather taught me to watch where the cows stood in the pasture on cold mornings. They'd cluster at seeps because the ground stayed 10 degrees warmer. You're looking for a spot maybe 15 feet across where the hillside weeps, not gushes. It'll feel spongy under your boots even in late winter. That soft spot is your seep, but finding it is only half the problem. Most folks find their seep, get excited, and grab a shovel. They dig a hole 2 feet deep, trying to get to the water faster. 3 days later, the hole's dry, and they're scratching their heads, wondering what happened. Here's what they did. Seep water moves through a layer of soil, maybe 6 inches thick, perched on clay or bedrock underneath. It's traveling sideways along that layer, not pooling. When you dig through it, you break the channels. The soil collapses, the pore spaces crush shut, and the water routes around your hole entirely. The old-timers knew you don't force a seep. You coax it. They'd scrape away leaves and duff, barely disturbing the soil, then set a basin right on top of that weeping layer. Gravity does the rest. The water keeps moving in its natural channels and just drips down into your catch basin instead of soaking into the hillside below. I've seen people ruin good seeps by trenching, by packing gravel in too tight, by trying to pipe it like a spring. A seep isn't a spring, it's a slow weep through living soil, and if you kill the soil structure, you kill the seep. That was only round one. 1 5-gallon food-grade bucket, the kind restaurants throw away, free. A piece of landscape fabric big enough to wrap it, $3 at any farm store. A 10-inch section of 1-inch PVC pipe for the overflow, $2. And 1 cubic foot of washed gravel, $7 at the hardware store if you don't have a creek nearby. That's $12 if you buy everything new. Most of you already own a shovel, a handsaw, and a drill. No pump, no solar panels, no fancy filtration that freezes and cracks come January. Just a bucket, some rocks, and gravity. My uncle's been running the same setup since 1987, and he's replaced the bucket twice. Modern systems use pressurized tanks and electric pumps because that's what the supply houses sell. This setup survives because there's nothing to break. No moving parts, no seals, no electronics. Water seeps in, settles through gravel, and you dip it out. Freezing temps don't crack it because you bury it right, and the earth stays 40 degrees Fahrenheit all winter 18 inches down. It's the same principle as a hand-dug well, just shallower and designed for slow seep flow instead of a water table. Appalachian families used this exact method for 200 years before rural electric came through. But the way you put it together, that's where most people stumble. You need a 5-gallon plastic bucket with a tight lid, the kind house paint comes in. Drill 12 to 15 holes around the bottom third using a 3/8-inch bit, spacing them 2 inches apart in staggered rows. Drop 4 inches of washed pea gravel in the bottom, then cut a circle of landscaping fabric to lay flat on top of that gravel layer. Now fill the bucket to within 6 inches of the rim with more pea gravel. Cut a 1-inch hole in the side of the bucket, 3 inches down from the top edge. Thread a 1-inch PVC elbow through that hole so the short end sits inside and the long end angles down outside. That's your overflow. Seal around the elbow with silicone rated for potable water. The fabric filters sediment before it reaches the gravel. The gravel filters again before water enters the bucket, and the whole thing stays buried, so the earth itself becomes insulation. The overflow prevents the basin from backing up during heavy flow or spring melt. And here's the part that separates a trickle from a steady flow. Walk your seep line until you find the spot where multiple wet streaks converge, usually a natural low point or a slight depression in the slope. That's your collection point. Scrape away leaf litter and the top 4 to 6 inches of soil, just enough to expose the saturated clay layer where water's actually moving. Set the bucket so its drilled bottom sits directly in that wet clay, then backfill around the sides with the soil you removed. You want the bucket rim 2 inches below ground level. The water flows into the bucket from below and from the sides through those holes you drilled. Gravity does the rest. Run your outlet line, a 3/4-inch poly pipe with a hose adapter threaded into the bucket lid, downhill toward wherever you're storing water. A drop of just 6 inches over 20 feet is enough. The seep pushes water into the bucket fills, and pressure sends it down that line without a pump. But none of this matters if it freezes solid come December. The water feeding your catch basin is coming from 3 to 6 feet underground, below the frost line where soil temperature holds steady at 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit all winter. It flows into the bucket, already above freezing, and keeps moving through the outlet line. Moving water resists ice formation, even at 33 degrees Fahrenheit, because flow disrupts the crystal structure before it can lock up. The bucket itself sits surrounded by earth, insulated on all sides, with only the lid at ground level under a layer of leaves and snow. That snow cover acts as a blanket. My grandfather ran a system like this from November through March for 40 years and never once saw it freeze, even the winter of '78 when we hit 8 below for a week straight. Surface collection, rainwater barrels, even shallow hand-dug wells, they all freeze because they're holding still water exposed to air. A seep-fed catch basin is the opposite: constant underground flow, earth insulation, and a design that works with the mountain's own heat. That's why this method outlasted every other water trick the old-timers tried. That solved the freeze problem, but there's still the question of volume. A good seep fills a 5-gallon bucket in 20 to 40 minutes. That's 180 to 360 gallons per day, running 24 hours without you lifting a finger. Most households use 80 to 100 gallons a day. The Hensley family up on Pine Mountain ran a seep system for 37 years. 4 people, garden, chickens, never ran dry even in the drought of '88. The Caudills over in Harlan County still use the same catch basin their grandfather set in 1971. This isn't theory. It's not something that worked once in a book. These are families who built it, used it, and handed it down because nothing else came close. But it wasn't done proving itself yet, not even close. Once a year, you pull the filter fabric, rinse it, and lay it back. Every couple years, check for roots trying to work their way in and trim them back. If the ground shifts after a hard freeze, you might need to re-level the basin so the overflow drains right. That's it. No pumps to seize up, no pressure tanks to replace, no well casing to crack when the frost heaves the ground. No electric bill, no service calls, no parts to order. The old-timers built things that lasted because they couldn't afford to replace them. A seep system has nothing to break because there's nothing moving. Water flows, gravity pulls, the earth does the work. And the one piece of insurance the old-timers always added? Almost too simple. You run a second catch basin 10 feet downhill from the first. Same setup, same $12 cost, fed by the same seep if the primary overflows or by runoff if it clogs. 2 buckets, 2 filters, 2 chances. The frontier mindset was redundancy over perfection. 2 cheap systems you can fix with a shovel beat 1 expensive system that dies when a part fails. If the upper basin fills, the overflow feeds the lower one automatically. I've seen setups where the backup basin caught water for 6 months straight after a root clogged the primary. The family never noticed because the second line kept running. That's the kind of insurance you can't buy at any hardware store. But here's the part that stops people before they even start. In West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina, and most of Virginia, seep water on your own land is yours. It's not a stream, not a defined watercourse, just diffuse groundwater coming up through your hillside. The state doesn't regulate it the way they do springs that form a channel. That changes the moment your collection system creates runoff that crosses a property line. You can't divert water onto your neighbor's land or dry up a wet spot they've been using for livestock. Stay 20 feet uphill of any boundary and you're clear in most cases. County extension offices keep copies of local watershed rules. Call them before you dig if your seep sits near a line or feeds into anything downstream. The conversation takes 10 minutes and saves you from a lawsuit that'll cost more than the land. This isn't about asking permission to use your own water. It's about knowing where your property ends and someone else's problems begin. The old-timers checked their survey pins every spring for a reason. My grandfather's seep still runs on the old home place. He set a bucket under it in 1974, sunk a pipe into the hillside with a rock collar just like this, and walked away. The bucket's gone. The house burned in '03, but that pipe still weeps cold water every February. I found it last winter, under 4 inches of leaves, half the collar stones missing, the overflow trench washed flat. Cleared the debris, and within an hour, it was filling a mason jar at the same slow drip he would have seen 50 years ago. The system outlasted the man who built it. Scout the seep in late winter. Dig your basin 18 inches deep. Set the catch barrel or bucket at the weep point. Pack rocks around it. Run your line downhill below frost, and keep the overflow clear. That's the whole method. And it works, because it's older than any of us. If you've got a wet spot on your hillside that won't dry out by March, you've got water. All you need is $12 and an afternoon. Give it a try, and if it works for you, subscribe so I know to keep these old mountain tricks coming.